All right, Red Wings fans, I really want you to brace yourself for this because I have always been the person talking about the Yzerplan and how it's been going. But it might be changing in front of us, and there's some people that might not like it. There's some people that might be, they might be a little bit too emotional. But if Steve Yzerman makes the move, I think he could potentially be lining up. Half the fan base is going to cheer, and the other half is going to panic because this isn't just a deadline decision. This is a timeline decision. And for years, I've had the plan. The plan's been clear for me. You draft smart, you develop patiently, avoid desperate trades, you protect long term flexibility. That's been me and Cindy on the Red Alert podcast. And that's been our MO about this team. But when you look at this team, it's worked. The things that we have talked about on this show, on this podcast, it's worked. The Red Wings went from bottom out to being in the playoff conversation again without sacrificing their future that they've worked hard to build. That takes discipline. A lot of teams don't have the discipline that Yzerman has had in terms of trying to figure out the right way to go about it. And they haven't had the luck of the number one overall pick. The Edmonton Oilers, they had Connor McDavid that they got as the number one overall pick. The Maple Leafs, who are maybe in a retool, they had Austin Matthews as like a top 2 pick. So the Red Wings weren't blessed with that situation. But here's the issue. The roster has changed. The expectations have changed. And the Eastern Conference is not waiting for Detroit to feel comfortable. If you look at the standings now, I mean, they're neck and neck. Depending on the day that you watch this video, they're neck and neck with Tampa Bay. Montreal's on their heels. Buffalo's winning a ton of games. This is since Christmas. Buffalo has a 731. Tampa Bay has a 958. Detroit has a 731. It's been a grind. Usually in the years that you potentially can get to 100 points, you'd be easily in the top 3. That is not the case this year. And why is the pressure different now? Okay, the difference. Why is it different now? This isn't year 1 of the rebuild anymore. You got core players who are entering prime years like Raymond, who is just on a tear, Lucas Raymond, 4 goals in the last 4 games, 7 in the last 10. This is a couple of days ago, but you get the drift. You got Seider, who is entering the prime of his career. You got young talent is arriving on cheap deals like a Nate Danielson, who potentially could be up, a Kosa, who could potentially be up, next year. All those things. And veterans were signed to stabilize the room. Guys like Patrick Kane, guys like Andrew Kopp, guys like JVR, all of them were signed to stabilize the room. And playoff expectations are no longer optional for this team. When you're in the 100th year of this franchise, you got to make the playoffs. This is the longest tenure that they have not been able to make the playoffs. This is a huge moment for the Detroit Red Wings. So at this point, where building turns into it's kind of time. This is where things get uncomfortable because patient is safe, being aggressive is risky, but contenders are built on taking calculated risk. Obviously, you're not going to go out and you're not going to give a bunch of picks for and prospects for Artemi Panarin, who's a 34-year-old, and you're not going to sign him to a 5-year contract for $50 million. Doesn't make sense to the Detroit Red Wings. But when you think about it like this, I'm not talking about a depth winger. I'm not talking about a bottom pair defenseman. I'm not talking about what they did last year with Numbnuts. I'm talking about a move that could clearly says, we believe this group can make noise. And that's on Yzerman. Yzerman's got to make the move to say, look, I believe in you guys. I think you guys could do it. And that could mean a legit top 6 scorer, a proven top 4 defenseman, a center upgrade that changes matchup dynamics. Those players, they're going to cost assets. They're going to cost picks. They might cost prospects. And even a player from the roster that you like. Depending on the upgrade, like if you get a Robert Thomas, I can guarantee you're going to be playing picks, prospects, and maybe even a roster player. And that's where the fan base splits because you have one side that says you have to pay to compete. And the other side says, do not ruin the future for a maybe. And I think you could go both ways. If you get a good player, like a top 6 forward, like a Robert Thomas, that's not a maybe. And you're paying to compete. So both sides can be happy at the same time. But what if he does nothing? Like, what if Yzerman does nothing? Let's flip this script right now. What if Yzerman stays patient? He has a small piece, protects every premium asset. That tells us something too, because it says he doesn't think this team is close enough yet. He values long-term window over short-term push. He believes internal growth matters more than a splash. That's logical. That's responsible in every sense of the imagination, especially if he believes that there's certain things that he doesn't like about the team and he doesn't think that he can get it all done in one trade deadline. But emotionally, fans don't want the logic now. They want progress that they could see. There's a lot of fans out there. They just want the results. They don't want the, you know, emotional. They want the emotional decision that they have. And this city has a. They just love the trades, uh, but sometimes you have to take a step back and look at it respectively. And I think you can go both ways. I really do think you can go both ways. But I think if Yzerman is going to show that this team, he's serious about this team, he's going to make a deal. And, the reality is this this is a philosophical moment for the Detroit Red Wings because this deadline isn't just about one season, it's about the philosophy. Are the Red Wings still in a rebuild or are they entering contention mode? These are two things that can go in the same breath. If they get a Robert Thomas, they're in a build mode, but they're also in a contention mode. If they go get a guy who could potentially help them this year, we've all heard that Steve Yzerman wants a guy with term. So they can do both at the same time because the moves look very different depending on the answer. And the most interesting part about this is Yzerman doesn't tip his hand ever, which means his actions will speak loud. Like he doesn't tip his hand, he doesn't speak to the media, he doesn't go on radio shows. He doesn't do that. So this is a big moment for the Detroit Red Wings. This is a big moment for Steve Yzerman, Todd McLellan, and the guys in the room. Because if you remember what Larkin said here,
you got to come up with wins, and I think especially in March, it was hard. That we didn't do anything, and then I felt the group kind of we didn't gain any momentum from the trade deadline, and guys were kind of down about it. So it'd be nice to add something and bring a little bit of a spark on the ice and maybe a morale boost as well.
Larks, how do you feel that you've maybe evolved?
So you heard right there from Larkin, that was last year. This goes hand in hand. The fan base wants a trade. Patrick Kane talked about the potential pieces that they could add, and he wants to add. I think you have to do it if you're Yzerman for the room. Like you have to do it. You cannot go through this trade deadline and do nothing. You just can't. Because the reality of the situation is once you start doing that, these players are going to tune you out. They're not going to take you seriously, to be honest, because they put such a hard effort into being second in the Atlantic, playing the way that they have, having a 630 point percentage this far in the year. They've earned the right to have an acquisition or two. And depending on the acquisition, I mean, look, Florida got re-energized by the trade of Matthew Tkachuk. And let's not forget what Florida had to give up to get Matthew Tkachuk. They had to give up Mackenzie Weegar, a good defenseman. They had to give up Jonathan Huberdeau, a good center, and it made their team. And that was a calculated risk that Bill Zito had for the Florida Panthers that ended up being right. It ended up being right. So for Yzerman, this all boils down to one thing. Because if a big move happens, it means Yzerman thinks the window is opening sooner than he thought. And if it doesn't, the patience is still a plan. And either way, we're about to learn how close Detroit exactly is. Because whether they make the playoffs and they don't make a trade, whether they make the playoffs and they make a trade, I think both can speak loudly. But I think Yzerman has to do this for the room. If there's any other thing, he's going to have to do this for the room. And we'll see you guys on the next Red Alert video podcast. We're going to be doing these daily videos every day. So subscribe, like, rate, review, and we'll see you in the next one.